speaker is Dr. Brian Muthyala. He is a physician in the Division of General and Internal Medicine. So he'll be giving a speech.
Hi everyone, so you are all high school students, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I can tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Brian. I'm an internist and a pediatrician here at the University of Minnesota. So what that means is I split my time. I spend about half of my time working at the University Hospital across the river, or here, and then at the Masonic Children's Hospital across the river. And then about half of my time is spent, half of my time is spent teaching in the medical school. I was a pretty non-traditional student. You were all probably more successful high school students than I was when I was in high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to medical school. I was an English major. I ended up teaching for a while. I went back to graduate school and then ended up coming to medicine in a pretty circuitous kind of route. I did my residency here at the University of Minnesota and do both global health work. I worked across the country, and I was working in Alaska for a while, and then now I've kind of settled back here. I think the advice that I give students is that you can do anything, and you can go to medical school. Here at the University of Minnesota, I don't sit on the admissions committee, but we do what's called a holistic review, which is that we look at your application in totality, right? So we look at what were your grades, what were your MCAT scores, what were your volunteer experiences, what is your personal statement, and we look at all those things equally because we know that a test score does not make a good doctor. And so the advice that I would give you all is to really stretch yourself and push yourself and do as many things as you can before you start down a path in medicine, because once you go down that path, it's really hard to do much else. And so if you have a passion for languages like the previous student, you should do that. And then you can always come back to medicine. Medicine will always be there. If you have an interest in traveling or the arts or literature or law or none of those things, you can do all of that stuff. You can go back, post-bac courses, you can get a master's degree, and then you can come back to medicine. And so there's not one way, there's not one path. I teach, I'm the course director for our first year students. I know that many of our students are scribes right now. About half, I want to say, probably our entering class have scribed in a medical clinic, so I know that's something that medical students do, or pre-med students do. But there's no path that's not possible, I guess, is really the thing that I want you to know. And there are some things you kind of need to do, right? You have to take biological science courses, you have to take the MCATs, you probably have to do some sort of volunteer work, and maybe some research. You would know more of those things than I would, but I think that if you can really find what your interest and your passion is, and you can engage in that activity, you'll be much happier than if you're just kind of forcing yourself to go volunteer at a place where you hate. It's hard enough to go to class probably in the morning, much less then on your free time to go and do something you don't like. So find the thing you love to do. If you're passionate about basketball, coach a team. If you love reading, volunteer in a library. If you like the outdoors, volunteer at a park. I mean, all of those things are really important to kind of enrich yourself as well as kind of give back to others. And I think that you will, and if medicine is the right path, then medicine is the right path for you. But it requires, I think, some exploration as well. It's a lot of time. It's 4 years of medical school. My residency was 4 years, so my graduate medical training was 4 years. So that's 8 years where I incurred a lot of debt. I didn't have a salary that some of my friends did, and so I think you have to really. It's long hours, so you have to love the work. You have to be committed to the process. I tell students there's a lot better ways to make money than to be a doctor, and so you have to really love the work because it requires a dedication and a passion that you have to have, otherwise you burn out pretty quickly. And so I think really deciding if this path is the right one for you, and I think you do that by exploring yourself, by exploring activities, volunteering in healthcare settings, getting to know, physicians, and then if it's the right path, kind of going and doing the academic and extracurricular things that you need to do. But know that there's a million ways to do it. I'm friends with the dean of admissions in the medical school. I can tell you that our medical school, and I think this is probably true across the country, is looking for students who are mature, well-rounded, thoughtful, kind, caring people who can then manage the rigors of medical school. And I think that, so I don't believe that you have to ignore the things you love to become a doctor. And in fact, you'll be successful if that's the way you want to go. So I didn't have doctors in my family. I didn't know what doctors did until I was in medical school. And so you don't have to have those things if you don't have them already. And so I think if you're kind of proactive about seeking out like good opportunities, you do well in school, it's an interest and passion of yours, those opportunities will present themselves. But know that, and if you finish undergrad and you're like, I want to go to medicine, but it's not the right time, you don't have to go to medical school right away. I took 1 year off. I know many people that took many years off, and no one, I think, regrets the time that they spent between their undergraduate and medical school. Because you are all high school students, you're going to go to college, and that's its own kind of bubble and its own kind of weird world where you're just in college, and then medical school is its own kind of bubble. And so people go, they travel, they volunteer, they do Peace Corps, they do whatever, they work at a bank or at a wherever, and then they say, or at a lab, and then they say, yeah, I want to go back to medical school, and they spend the time to do it. So there's a lot of ways to do it, I think, but if I think done in the right way, medicine can be a really fulfilling career. I was going to be a teacher, and it wasn't the right fit for me. I taught for a little while, and I realized very quickly that I didn't want to, and so I changed careers pretty quickly and moved to a different, moved to graduate school, and then moved to medical school, and it has allowed me to meet a lot of people and travel and do a lot of really exciting and rich things, and I get to still teach medical students now instead of kindergartners, which is what I used to teach. So yeah, I think that's I think the message, at least historically, when I was more connected to where you all were with, and you had to do certain things in a certain order, and then you went to medical school, and I guess I can tell you the reality is that there's a lot of ways to go about doing it, and it's the way that's for you all, so that I would encourage you to undertake if it's the right fit. Any questions for me? Yeah?
I have a question more about your job right now.
Yeah.
So what does like a typical day look like for you?
So I have a weird job. So my wife is a clinic. We did the same residency training together, and she's a primary care doctor. So what that means is she works at a clinic. She sees patients 4 days a week, and then on her off day, and that's usually from about 7 to 4, and then usually on her day off, she's charting and calling patients and doing that sort of thing. I'm what's called a hospitalist, so I work in the hospital. And so my job description is I take care of adults and kids who are admitted to the hospital for non-surgical reasons. So if you have a pneumonia or a urinary tract infection or an asthma attack or something like that, I will admit you to the hospital. And my days are unusual, where I work 7 days in a row, and then I have a week off. And so I work usually at about 7 or 7:30, I get to work, then I'm there till about 6 or 6:30 most days. And then we work weekends, I work evenings, I work some overnights, so some of my shifts start at 7 a.m., some of my shifts start at 3 p.m., and some of my shifts start at 9 p.m., and I work overnight until the next day about 8 o'clock in the morning. And so my schedule is a little bit more varied and sporadic, but then it allows me a little bit more flexibility, so I'm able to, on my off weeks, I teach in a medical school, I can travel, I can do all sorts of other things. So there's a lot of different, and I think that there is this perception that doctors work all the time and they don't spend time with their families, and I think we're lucky that we make a good enough salary that we can live how you want to live, which is if I want to work part-time, if I want to take a smaller salary, which is still plenty for my wife and my family to live very comfortably in Minneapolis, then we don't have to work crazy hours. And so I think one of the beauties of medicine is there's never a shortage of jobs, and so you really have the opportunity opportunity to tailor it to how it fits your life and the goals and aspirations that you have. Yeah.
So, was that same sort of schedule when you entered medical school, and your residency was your time as flexible as it is now?
No. So I'm lucky now. I mean, I think medical school is changing, and residency is changing. So when I was a medical student, we probably had about 30 hours of inpatient class a week, plus probably another 50 to 60 hours of studying on top of that. I don't know what the hours are of a student, but it's a full-time, more than a full-time job. I would estimate that your average the medical school is split into basically 2 blocks. Your first 2 years, you're for the most part in the classroom in many medical schools. And those, I would estimate students spend about 60 hours a week, maybe in class or studying. Their last 2 years, you're in rotation. So you're going to the hospital, you're spending a month on the OBGYN service, you're spending a month on peds, you're spending a month doing surgery. And those, it can be longer hours. When I was a resident, we did like overnight calls. So we would start in the morning at 7, and then we would be there the next day until about noon. And then we would have the rest of the day off. And then we'd be back the next day. And we cap it at about 80 hours per week, averaged over 4 weeks, is what the rules are basically. I would say our residents average about, on their busy months, 60 to 70 hours a week in the hospital. And then on their slower, quieter, and they have 1 day off a week. And then on their quieter blocks, months, they work 40 to 50 hours a week, and they have their weekends off. I would say that medical school and definitely residency is much less flexible. The hope, I think, as an educator is that that no student or resident has to give up the things that are really important to them, but it's about like planning, being intentional, and yes, you might miss some things, but the hope is that you're able to, and your life is able to be flexible enough to work around.
So when you were doing your rotations for the last 2 years of medical school, is that when you really sparked, like, this is the specialty that I want to do, or when did you know that you wanted to go into internal medicine?
I think students get that feeling. I think there are many kinds of students. Some students, they say, I know I want to go into this from day one, and maybe they had a personal experience with a type of doctor or a type of medical problem in themselves or their family that kind of motivated them to be something. And then there's a student who thinks that they're that way, and then at some point changes their mind. And I would say that's probably the most typical student, which is I think I know what I want to do, and then you go through it all, and then you're like, I actually did it. And our students, they start interacting with physicians from day one. They do a lot of shadowing of physicians of different specialties. They get exposure pretty early, so they start to get a sense, I would say, by the middle of their first year and second year. But definitely it's during your third year that you're really spending that intensive time with a specialty, and only through doing the work can somebody figure out what they want. Like, I didn't know what a doctor did until I spent time with them, and so how can you know early on? I think it's quite difficult. So I think that students usually, they have to know by the middle of their fourth year, they have to know what they're going into, but plenty of students have no idea what they want to go into, and that is, I advise students, I say that's totally okay, because how could you know? I certainly didn't know what doctors did. I still don't know what some kind of doctors do, right? If you ask me, like, what is the day of a urologist? I have no idea, because I've never really spent that much time with them. And so it's only through exploring and seeing yourself can you really figure out what you want to do. For me, it was through mentorship that I was fortunate enough to get, and then an interest in the area that I went into. And that still changed over time. I thought I wanted to do adolescent medicine for a long time, and then I thought I wanted to do critical care medicine for a long time. I thought I wanted to live internationally as for my career and my life, and that's changed. So I just think that there's always opportunities to change your mind, as there is in college and as there is in medical school and residency. Nothing is ever set in stone, and it might feel that way, but it's not. And you can really, there's enough flexibility. And even if my job, like my wife and I have the same training, we have completely different jobs. I have a friend who has the same exact training I do, but he's gone on and done additional training, so his job is completely different than my own. So there's a lot of difference in choice along the way as well.
So what helped you the most during medical school and your residency to get through those long hours and learning?
It's a great question. I mean, so I'll be honest, so I'm pretty open about this. So I was at times during my residency pretty depressed and saw a therapist, and that was really important. After that, I was building the skills that I needed to kind of stay organized, to stay connected to my friends and family, to stay connected to the people that matter to me the most, to continue to do the things I enjoyed to do. And so on the months where I worked 80 hours a week, I couldn't do a lot of the things that I wanted to do. If I wasn't working, I was sleeping probably. But on those off months where I wasn't working as hard, when I was working 50 hours a week, those were the weeks, the months that I really spent time recharging myself. And even in high school, right, there's the stuff that you do that's draining. There's the stuff that you do that's neutral, that doesn't really fill your tank. And then there's the things that like fill your tank and you feel energized afterwards. And I think, and you can all identify what those things are, I think, for you. And they're gonna be different for all of you, and I think it's important to like make that list in your head and how are you gonna spend your time. Like it's easy to just kind of like veg out and watch like Netflix. And that might be the right thing for some of you, right? To me, that's a neutral thing. That's just like passing the time. I'm not like engaging my brain, but I'm not like filling my tank. If I really want to like restore and rejuvenate myself, I exercise, or I go grab a coffee with a friend, or I go see my family, or I spend time with my kid. Those are the things that are rejuvenating. And so I think finding out what are those things for you all, and where do you want to put your time. You're already super busy, I bet, right? And so already you're finding that you're stretched thin, and how do you put your time into each of those buckets so that you're kind of recharged. And then I think it's about values too, like what do you love and value, and how do you, and who do you love and value, and keeping those things. Any other questions? You guys are easy. Yeah.
Do you, like, can high school students shadow doctors at the University of Minnesota, or like, how would you say, get into hospital?
That's a good question. It's hard because there's a lot of paperwork that's needed to shadow in certain places, and so it's not easy, and like not all departments allow students to come because of the kind of the administrative burden. So I think a lot of it is like having a connect is helpful. I think that as the woman before me was saying, I think there are a lot of ways to kind of be adjacent to medicine, and frankly, like those are the skills that can be really, and experiences that can be really useful. So whether it's volunteering in a place where there are children that are sick, like the Ronald McDonald House, working as a nursing aide, working as a scribe. These are all ways that you can put yourself next to doctors or in proximity to medicine in general to see what it is that you really want to do and what you really like, right? There's a lot of ways to care for people, and you might spend time as do you guys know what a scribe is? I'm sorry, I'm using it. So a scribe, it's a job that is really common across the country and here in the Twin Cities. You all, I don't know if high schoolers can do it, but definitely like undergrads can do it. You sign up, and then you basically, what you do is you get some orientation, and then you have a computer or something, and you're standing next to a doctor, whether it's in an ER or a clinic, and basically the doctor's time is very valuable, and especially like doctors aren't maybe good at typing, and so they basically talk, and you scribe or you type for them, and you write their note, and then you move on to the next patient, and the next patient you're kind of their like shadow basically, and you just kind of type what happens. And so there are a lot of those opportunities. So then you get to see like, oh, this is what an ER is like, or this is what an eye doctor is like, or a primary care doctor is like. And you usually get placed in one environment, and then you get to see what that's like. And again, it puts you in proximity with people. And you might find out, you might say, boy, this doctoring thing is not for me. But what the nurses are doing seems really cool, or what the speech therapist does is really cool, because I get to see what how they interact with people. So I think that those are all good opportunities to do it. I don't know about like there are formal like shadowing opportunities for undergrads, or for high school students. Even undergrads, it can be really case-by-case basis.
Oh yeah, sorry, this is a little bit late, but as a resident, just with it being really hard regardless of that, what would you say your most rewarding experiences looked like, even while you were working for that?
I mean, I love spending time with people, so I'm very privileged to get to, I can go talk to a stranger about the most personal parts of their life, which is unusual. So, I still remember, I went to high school in St. Paul. I graduated from Central High School, and I took care of a guy who graduated from Central High School, except he was a World War II vet and had jumped out of an airplane on D-Day. And I got to spend, a half an hour with him, talking to him about his medical things, but then also about his life too. And so in medicine, you get put in proximity with people who have these varied experiences, which is kind of amazing. You get to see people it's kind of like being a writer. You get to see people at their highest point, maybe the best days of their life. So I work in a newborn nursery some days, so I take care of babies that are just born, so these are families that are often really excited. And then I see people on the worst days of their life too, so people I give people cancer diagnoses, and I tell people that they're dying, or I tell their family members that they're dying, their loved ones are dying. And so you get this full kind of spectrum of the human condition, I guess, which is really powerful and really grounding, I think. If you think about like who you as individuals interact with, a lot of it is kind of just like the same person. Like you see the people you go to high school with, or in your neighborhood, or like the church or community that you belong to, and it's all kind of one pretty homogenous, whatever that homogeny is, it's a pretty homogenous population. And if you go work in almost any other field, you just kind of see the people that you see. But in medicine, you get to see everybody, which I think is really kind of amazing, and interact with everybody. And so those are the moments that I've always really kind of cherished and taken away from, especially at this point in my career when the medical part is easier. So a really sick patient, I know usually, I mean, knock on wood, I usually know what to do, and so that part is easier. And so what is really enriching is spending time with students, like yourselves, with residents, and then with kind of patients. Any other questions? You all go to the same high school?
No, yeah, we're pretty spread out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a lot of great information.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.